Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone you trust, a friend, a mentor, a lover. Their voice is calm, their gaze steady. The words they speak feel reassuring, wise even, and yet hours later, as you lie awake replaying the conversation, something doesn't sit right. You can't name it, you can't prove it, but somewhere deep in your gut there's a quiet nausea, a sense that your mind has been touched, shifted, tilted slightly off-center, like a picture frame that was once straight, now imperceptibly skewed. You shake it off. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, but that feeling lingers. Days pass, maybe weeks, and you begin to change, just a little. Your opinions soften, your instincts dull, your doubts grow louder, and one day you realize the version of you that once stood tall is now slightly hunched, squinting through fog, unsure of where the manipulation began or if it ever truly ended. Now ask yourself this: what if you've been manipulated your entire life and never knew it? Not just by people, by ideas, by systems, by the very language you use to think. What if the stories you tell yourself, the truths you hold dear, were planted there, not maliciously, not even consciously, but methodically, systemically, like seeds in soil that was never yours to begin with? What if the most dangerous manipulations don't come from liars, but from people who genuinely believe they're helping you? And here's the paradox. The better the manipulation, the more invisible it becomes. The more certain you feel, the more you may have already lost your grip on truth. Because real manipulation doesn't feel like pressure, it feels like clarity. It masquerades as wisdom, concern, even love. It's a whisper, not a scream, a gentle tug, not a shove. Manipulation is not just what happens between two people, it's a condition of consciousness. It's the subtle art of bending perception, of altering your emotional compass just enough to steer your choices without you ever noticing the hand on the wheel. It's the slow erosion of intuition, the quiet rewiring of belief, and perhaps most disturbingly, it often comes wearing the face of reason, of logic, even of morality. So here's the question: what if your thoughts are not your own? What if your deepest convictions, your political ideals, your self-image, your ambitions, are simply echoes of a narrative that was sold to you before you even had a chance to question it? What if what you call free will is, in part, the residue of someone else's agenda? It's tempting to believe that manipulation is something done only by malicious people, cult leaders, narcissists, con artists. But what if it's far more ordinary than that? What if it's woven into parenting, education, advertising, religion, media? What if it's hidden in compliments, disguised in praise, smuggled inside expectations? And what if you're not just the victim, but also the perpetrator? Yes, you. The one who unconsciously guilts your partner into acting a certain way, who exaggerates a story to win sympathy, who withholds affection to gain power, who flatters when you want something, who lies not out of cruelty, but out of fear, out of need, out of habit. You're not evil for it, but you are part of it, because manipulation is not some rare pathology. It is the default language of an ego trying to survive, a defense mechanism of the psyche, a strategy as ancient as the first human lie. And like all powerful tools, it can heal or harm, depending on who wields it and why. But here's where things get truly unsettling. Most manipulation is unconscious. That's why it works. Not because someone is playing a master chess game with your soul, but because neither they nor you realize what's actually happening beneath the surface. We are born into a web of influence. Parents condition behavior through reward and punishment. Schools enforce conformity through approval and shame. Advertisers hijack your desires, convincing you that self-worth can be bought. Religions offer salvation if you obey, and all the while your sense of self is being shaped, edited, and engineered by forces you've been taught to trust. You may think you are thinking, but are you really? Or are you just reacting, predictably, emotionally, automatically, to a stimulus designed to provoke a specific response? Manipulation doesn't just hijack your mind, it colonizes it. It plants ideas that feel so natural, so intuitive, you mistake them for your own. And in doing so, it creates an illusion of autonomy while quietly steering the ship. And the most terrifying part, you only notice it once it's too late. Once the relationship has already turned toxic, once your beliefs have already calcified, once your life is already shaped by choices you never consciously made. So now, you find yourself in a strange place. questioning everything and nothing, suspicious but unsure of what to suspect. You walk through your life half awake, half aware, whispering, "Is this me, or someone else's version of me?" You wonder, what is manipulation made of? Where does it begin and end? Is it always wrong, or just sometimes? Can you defend yourself against it, if it's happening inside your own mind? And if manipulation is everywhere, can anyone truly be free? These are not just questions, they are keys, if you dare to use them, if you're willing to descend into the shadows of the human psyche and confront the mechanisms you've been blind to all along. Because until you understand how manipulation works, on the neurological, emotional, and existential levels, you will remain its puppet, smiling, nodding, choosing, believing, without ever knowing what to. Hey. But the deeper you go, the more you'll see, and once seen, some truths cannot be unseen. So the real question becomes, are you ready to see what's beneath the surface? Because what comes next is not comfortable, it's not safe, it's not easy. But it might just be the first honest step toward freedom. What is the true origin of manipulation? Not just as an action, but as an instinct, a survival strategy, a structure of consciousness itself. To understand the roots of manipulation, you must first abandon the idea that it is a rare, calculated act done by villains in dark suits behind closed doors. That narrative is comforting. It externalizes the problem. It says manipulation lives out there, in others, never in you. But the truth is older, deeper, more disturbing. Manipulation begins in childhood, in the cradle of dependency. A baby cannot survive alone. It learns quickly, through silence, touch, approval, disapproval, that pleasing others ensures its survival. A frown teaches it shame, a smile, reward, crying becomes a tool, laughter, a weapon. Long before we speak, we begin to manipulate, not with malice, with instinct. Psychologist Carl Jung argued that the human psyche is not born whole, but fragmented, divided between what we are and what we must appear to be. The child, in order to be loved, represses certain impulses and exaggerates others. This becomes the beginning of the persona, the social mask we wear, and buried beneath that mask, the shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide, deny, or disown. But what happens when we spend a lifetime identifying with the mask? We forget who we are. We begin manipulating not only others, but ourselves. We convince ourselves that we are good even as we deceive, that we are honest even as we hide, that we are authentic even as we mimic what we believe will gain us approval. This is the first great manipulateur, self-deception, and it is nearly always unconscious. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But we don't just deceive to survive childhood. We continue to do so because society rewards it. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about the herd instinct, the powerful drive within human beings to conform. Not because it is wise or good, but because it is safe, comforting, predictable. The herd protects, but it also punishes difference, so we learn to bend, to blend in, to suppress the parts of ourselves that threaten the status quo. This too is manipulation, the editing of truth for the sake of belonging. Society trains us to become manipulators, of others, yes, but more insidiously, of ourselves. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that human beings are driven not by reason, but by the will, a blind, irrational force of desire. And where there is desire, there is power. Every human interaction becomes, subtly or overtly, a negotiation of will. Who will submit? Who will dominate? Who will charm, seduce, convince, guilt, flatter, frighten? Manipulation, then, is not an exception to the human condition. It is embedded in it. Even language, our most trusted tool for communication, is designed, often unconsciously, to manipulate. Every sentence we speak is shaped to control perception. We soften truths to avoid conflict. We exaggerate to gain sympathy. We omit to protect our image. We reframe reality to maintain our narrative. Consider this. When you say, "I'm just being honest," what are you really doing? Are you delivering truth, or are you delivering a specific version of truth designed to provoke a particular reaction? Language is never neutral. It's architecture for thought. It creates reality as much as it describes it, and once reality is constructed, it can be controlled. But this raises a deeper problem, one philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre, wrestled with. If freedom is the essence of our being, why are we so eager to give it away? Why do we let ourselves be manipulated? The answer lies in a painful truth. Freedom is terrifying. To live freely means to accept full responsibility for your thoughts, your actions, your identity. It means embracing uncertainty, standing alone, rejecting easy narratives, questioning even what you love. Most people do not want that. They want comfort, security, belonging, and so manipulation becomes a trade we're willing to make. We let others think for us, decide for us, lead us, condition us, sell to us, control us, as long as the illusion of safety is preserved. Aldous Huxley saw this future coming. In Brave New World, he portrayed a society not controlled by tyranny, but by pleasure, by distraction, by chemical sedation and emotional gratification. A society where manipulation was not enforced by violence, but embraced by the masses, because it felt good. He wrote, "The perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, a prison without walls where the prisoners do not even dream of escape." That is our world. Manipulation has evolved. It no longer looks like brute control. It looks like entertainment, like convenience, like self-care. You are encouraged to indulge, to scroll, to consume, to optimize yourself endlessly, believing that you're choosing all of it freely. But you are not. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, argued that man's deepest need is meaning, and that the absence of meaning, the existential vacuum, creates vulnerability. Vulnerability to manipulation. Because when you do not know who you are or why you exist, you become desperate to be told. Desperate people are easy to influence. So manipulation doesn't just target weakness, it creates it. It erodes your inner compass until you crave external direction. It hollows out your identity until all that's left is performance, what others want to see, hear, believe. And here lies the great philosophical tragedy. The more we seek approval, the less we become ourselves. The more we aim to control others, the more we become controlled by fear. Because at the core of all manipulation is fear. The fear of being unloved, the fear of rejection, the fear of irrelevance, of powerlessness, of being unseen. And so we manipulate, not to be evil, but to avoid that abyss, that terrifying silence where we are forced to face our true self. But silence is where truth lives. So the question becomes, are you willing to confront that fear, to walk into that silence, to face the shadow you've hidden and the masks you've worn? Because until you do, manipulation will remain your native tongue, spoken fluently, unconsciously, daily. You will become both its prisoner and its prophet. And yet, there's something else, something still beneath the surface. We've explored the roots, the psychological architecture, the philosophical skeleton, but we've not yet uncovered the full cost. Because manipulation doesn't simply distort communication or emotion, it rewrites reality. It changes how we see each other, how we love, how we build society. And its consequences, silent, invisible, compounding, are far more devastating than you've been led to believe. So now, we must descend deeper. We must examine what happens when manipulation isn't just a tactic, but a worldview. When it seeps into culture, infects systems, and becomes the unconscious operating system of an entire civilization. Because if you can't see the trap, you can't escape it. What happens when manipulation becomes normalized? Not as a rare distortion, but as the background noise of everyday life, a frequency so constant that you forget it's even there. You stop noticing, you stop questioning, you simply adapt. Like a fish unaware of water, you swim in a reality subtly distorted by invisible hands. But distortion leaves a residue. It begins quietly. You second-guess your instincts. You feel slightly disconnected from your own emotions, as if there's a thin layer of glass between you and your reality. You hesitate before speaking. You over-explain your choices. You begin asking for permission to exist. Over time, this becomes a personality. Not your true self, but a version sculpted by invisible pressures. a curated identity built to survive a world where authenticity feels dangerous. You become agreeable when you should be honest, polite when you should be furious, silent when your soul is screaming. And no one notices, because everyone else is doing the same. This is the first unseen consequence: self-alienation. Manipulation does not only change what you believe, it fractures your relationship with your own inner truth. It teaches you to distrust yourself. It creates a loop of chronic self-surveillance, constantly asking, is this okay to say? Will this offend? Will this be approved? The tragedy is that you begin to think of this as maturity. But it's not growth, it's erosion. It's the slow collapse of the authentic self under the weight of 1,000 unspoken expectations. And when an entire society operates this way, the damage becomes cultural. We now live in an age of curated realities. Social media has turned identity into performance. Algorithms decide what is visible. Virality rewards emotional manipulation. Outrage is monetized. Empathy is automated. Attention is currency. And every platform, every voice, every brand, including you, is subtly incentivized to manipulate, to provoke, to seduce, to sell, to please. But when everything becomes a performance, who is the audience, and what is left of the performer? Consider the cognitive architecture behind this manipulation. Psychologists have long studied cognitive biases, the unconscious mental shortcuts your brain uses to make sense of the world. These shortcuts are efficient, but they are also deeply flawed. Manipulators exploit them expertly. The confirmation bias ensures you only see evidence that supports your existing beliefs. The halo effect makes you trust people simply because they seem attractive or charismatic. The authority bias causes you to defer to experts, even when they are wrong. The scarcity bias triggers panic when you think something is limited, even if it's not. And perhaps most disturbingly, the illusion of transparency convinces you that your intentions are obvious to others, even when they are not. This is how manipulation survives in broad daylight, not through brute force, but by hijacking your brain's own wiring. And when this neurological architecture is merged with technology, the result is a kind of digital hypnosis. Your feed is not neutral. Your search results are not random. Your sense of what is true, what is urgent, what is real, has been filtered, ranked, optimized, and shaped by systems that do not have your best interests in mind. The manipulation is no longer human, it's systemic, algorithmic, automated, and yet it doesn't feel coercive, it feels convenient. This is the great deception of modern life, that freedom means having choices. But the reality is, you are not just choosing, you are being nudged. Every scroll, every click, every tap is data. And that data is used to build a psychological profile, what you fear, what you crave, what triggers you. And that profile is used to shape what you see next. You're not consuming information. Information is consuming you. And when reality itself becomes negotiable, when truth is filtered through infinite lenses, how do you know who to trust? This is the second consequence: epistemic collapse, the death of shared truth. Without shared reality, people can no longer agree on the facts, let alone values. Dialogue becomes impossible. Every debate devolves into tribal warfare. Every disagreement becomes a threat to identity. Nuance disappears. Certainty becomes weaponized. And when trust collapses, fear rushes in to fill the void. Fear of being wrong, fear of being misled, fear of being manipulated again. But here's the most haunting part. In a world saturated with manipulation, even authenticity can be faked. Even truth can be engineered. Vulnerability can be monetized. Intimacy can be scripted. You've seen it. The influencer crying on camera. The brand using mental health awareness to sell shoes. The politician using empathy as a marketing strategy. The manipulator pretending to be a victim. It becomes impossible to tell what's real. So you begin to retreat. You withdraw from relationships. You stop trusting institutions. You become cynical. You armor your heart. You start seeing everyone as a potential manipulator, and in doing so, you cut yourself off from the one thing that can actually protect you: connection. This is the third consequence: emotional disintegration. Manipulation, when internalized, creates what psychologists call learned helplessness. The belief that no matter what you do, you'll be misled, misunderstood, or betrayed. So you stop trying, you numb yourself, you live in emotional exile. And when that happens, manipulation no longer needs to be active. It has succeeded. Because the most efficient form of control is self-regulation, when you no longer need to be silenced, because you've already silenced yourself. The final consequence is perhaps the most tragic, the death of inner authority. This is the moment you no longer ask, "What do I think?" but instead, "What should I think?" You no longer ask, "What do I feel?" but instead, "What's the appropriate emotion here?" You no longer ask, "What is true for me?" but instead, "What will make others accept me?" This is not life, it's mimicry, and it is precisely what philosopher Jean Baudrillard warned about, the hyper-reality, where symbols replace substance, simulations replace experience, and everything feels real, but nothing is true. The human being becomes an echo chamber, a collection of borrowed opinions, a shell animated by fear and desire, but devoid of inner gravity. But here's the truth beneath the ruin. You are not broken, you are buried. Buried beneath layers of conditioning, manipulation, and learned performance. Your soul is intact, but muffled. Your intuition still speaks, but faintly. Your truth still burns, but dimly. The question is not whether manipulation has touched you. It has. It always has. The question is whether you are willing to unlearn it, to confront the consequences, to reclaim what was lost, to rebuild what was hollowed out, not with blind defiance, but with ruthless self-honesty, with radical awareness, because manipulation cannot survive in the presence of clarity. And that clarity is what comes next. What if everything you were taught to believe about strength is a lie? What if the greatest rebellion isn't loud or visible, not a riot in the streets or a flag waving in defiance, but something quieter, far more dangerous to the forces that govern you? What if rebellion begins the moment you stop reacting? Imagine waking up in a room you've lived in your entire life. The walls are familiar, the furniture comforting. You think you know where everything is, you trust the layout. But then, for a split second, the light hits differently, and you notice something strange. A seam in the wall, a door you never knew existed. And for the first time, the possibility dawns on you. What if this room was never yours? What if it was designed to keep you inside? Breaking free from manipulation is not about escaping others. It's about waking up from the version of yourself that was shaped by their expectations. It is a rebellion of awareness. And like all revolutions, it begins with betrayal, not of others, but of the old self, the compliant self, the self who nodded when they should have questioned, smiled when they should have spoken, adapted when they should have resisted. The first act of freedom is treason against the parts of you that were trained to obey. But where do you begin? Question the narrative, all of it. Not just what others say, but the voice in your own head, especially the one that sounds calm, reasonable, and mature. Because that voice may not be yours. It may be the voice of your mother when you disappointed her, the teacher who punished your defiance, the partner who gaslit you, the culture that told you what success looks like, the voice that says, "Don't be difficult, don't overreact, don't make people uncomfortable." Ask yourself, where did this thought come from? Who benefits from me believing it? You must become a forensic investigator of your own mind. Because the first layer of manipulation is thought control, and thought control is maintained not by force, but by normalization. The more a belief is repeated, the truer it feels. That's not evidence of truth. That's evidence of conditioning. Nietzsche once said, "Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies, because lies can be exposed. Convictions we protect with our lives." Reclaim your emotional sovereignty. If manipulation hijacks your emotions, then liberation begins by reclaiming them. That means feeling your anger without guilt, your grief without apology, your joy without permission. You have been taught that certain emotions are inappropriate, that to cry is weakness, that to rage is immature, that to feel deeply is dangerous. But emotions are not the enemy, they are messages, and if you ignore them long enough, they become distorted, or worse, they become weapons in the hands of others. Emotional repression is the perfect breeding ground for manipulation. You cannot be manipulated by a feeling you fully own, but you can be controlled by the feelings you suppress. Start asking, is this emotion mine, or was it handed to me? Do I feel shame because I truly believe I did wrong, or because someone taught me to feel small? Carl Jung believed that shadow work, the process of integrating the repressed parts of ourselves, is essential for psychological freedom. Your shadow holds not only your wounds, but your power, your voice, your intuition, your untamed truth. To break free, you must become dangerous again, not to others, but to the false self that keeps you compliant. Well, make peace with discomfort. One of the most effective tools of manipulation is your craving for comfort. Manipulators don't need to dominate you if they can simply make you afraid of being uncomfortable. Discomfort becomes a leash. It keeps you in toxic relationships because leaving feels uncertain. It keeps you silent in the face of injustice because speaking up might make things awkward. It keeps you glued to your screen, anesthetized, numbed, entertained, because boredom, solitude, silence all feel unbearable. But the truth is, growth is uncomfortable. Healing is uncomfortable. Honesty is uncomfortable. The most powerful people you know, the ones who speak truth, who live boldly, who seem immune to external validation, did not become that way by avoiding pain. They walked through it. They sat in discomfort until it no longer controlled them. That is freedom, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to bow to it. Speak, even when your voice shakes. One of the most subtle forms of manipulation is silencing. You've been trained to think before you speak, but too often that means calculating how your truth will be received, edited, reframed, or punished. So you hold back. You wait for the right time. You soften the blow. You ask for permission. And slowly you begin to disappear. To break free, you must reclaim your voice. That does not mean being loud. It means being real. Speak what is true for you, even if it's messy, even if it's unpopular, even if it shatters illusions. Because every time you choose honesty over performance, something ancient reawakens. Your soul remembers that it has a right to exist, not as an echo, but as a force. Choose solitude over approval. If manipulation thrives on your need to belong, then choosing solitude is an act of defiance. It is the space where you detox from performance, where you remember who you are without an audience. Most people are terrified of being alone, not because of the silence, but because in silence, all the buried truths begin to rise. You will meet your fear, your regrets, your forgotten dreams, but you will also meet your voice again, your values, your original knowing, the inner compass that existed before anyone told you who you should be. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard believed that the individual must pass through the sickness unto death, the despair of realizing one's life was shaped by conformity, in order to be reborn in truth. That solitude is not isolation, but soul retrieval. The more time you spend with your unfiltered self, the more immune you become to manipulation, because manipulators depend on your hunger for external validation. Starve that hunger, and their power withers. Practice radical discernment. Not everything that feels true is true. Not every emotion is a sign. Not every charismatic person is wise. Not every noble idea is pure. Discernment is the ability to feel deeply and think critically, to hold space for complexity, to detect the subtle difference between love and control, between influence and manipulation, between guidance and gaslighting. It is not cynicism, it is clarity. Discernment asks, what is this person's motive? Do their actions match their words? Is this invitation expanding me or shrinking me? Without disguise. Discernment, rebellion becomes reaction, and reaction can be easily manipulated. With discernment, rebellion becomes response, rooted, grounded, intentional, free. 7. Remember, liberation is a practice, not a moment. You do not wake up one day completely unmanipulated. You unlearn in layers. You catch yourself mid-pattern. You stumble. You remember. You fall again. You realign. Freedom is not a destination, it is a discipline. Every day you choose truth over performance, presence over programming, authenticity over approval. you are rebelling. And every time you speak when it's easier to be silent, question when it's easier to conform, feel when it's easier to numb, you are taking back territory from the forces that colonized your mind. Because here is the ultimate rebellion: to be fully alive in a world that wants you tame, to be awake in a culture built to sedate you, to be honest in relationships built on pleasing, to think deeply in systems that reward obedience, to be you, fully, unashamedly, fiercely, without explanation. That is revolution. And you don't need permission to begin. What if the final manipulation is that you ever needed to be manipulated at all? What if the cage was never locked? What if the voice that told you you are not ready, you must change to be loved, you are broken and need fixing? What if that voice was the lie? Imagine standing at the edge of everything you've ever known. Behind you, the architecture of your beliefs, the roles you've played, the identity you've so carefully maintained. In front of you, nothing but open space, no story, no script, no guarantees. And in that terrifying silence, something ancient stirs. It is not your ego, not your trauma, not your curated self-image. It is something older than all of that. It is the voice before all voices. It is you without the conditioning, you without the mask, you unmanipulated. And here's the paradox. It was never gone, only covered. You were born with it, before the world taught you who to become, but you forgot. We all do. Oh. Because manipulation is not just a strategy of others, it becomes a habit of the self, a loop, a trance. And the ultimate trance is this: that you need something outside of you to tell you who you are, that you need a system to give you purpose, a relationship to give you worth, a goal to make you valuable, a belief to make life meaningful. But what if you never needed any of it? What if the ultimate freedom is not rebellion, but remembrance? Not the learning of new truths, but the unlearning of falsehoods. The deepest realization, more haunting than any manipulation tactic, more profound than any philosophical argument, is this: you are already whole, not in the self-help cliché sense, not in the "you're perfect as you are" saccharine echo chamber of Instagram wisdom, but in the truest sense. Your existence is not in need of justification. You do not need to be fixed. You do not need to be optimized. You do not need to be marketed, approved, sold, analyzed, or branded. You do not need to become anything to be worthy of life. Every manipulative system you've encountered, social, relational, economic, spiritual, has one thing in common. It starts with the premise that you are not enough, that you must earn, prove, correct, obey, or ascend to become enough. That is the core lie. Because the moment you believe it, you can be led anywhere, sold anything, controlled by anyone, and you will beg for the leash that enslaves you, so long as it promises you a future where you are finally worthy. This is the cruel genius of manipulation. It doesn't coerce your behavior, it hijacks your self-concept. But the moment you see it clearly, everything changes. You stop searching for permission. You stop negotiating your value. You stop asking, "Who should I be?" and begin asking, "Who am I beneath the noise?" And beneath the noise, there is no marketai, nung slogan. No spiritual bypass, no tribal identity, no performance. There is only presence, raw, honest, unfiltered, and yes, terrifying, because it requires you to stand alone, without reference points, without the safety of a narrative. But that's where you begin to see all the manipulation in the world. Every toxic relationship, every controlling institution, every cultural lie only had power because you believed it had something you didn't. And the truth is, it never did. The power was always yours, not the power to control others. That's just another disguise of fear. Not the power to perform better. That's just manipulation in drag. But the power to be real, to be whole, to be free, even if no one understands you, even if it makes you an outcast, even if it dismantles everything you thought your life was about. Because the deeper you go, the more you realize freedom is not a destination. It's a disposition. It's how you walk through life when you no longer need to manipulate or be manipulated. You begin to live with radical integrity, not perfection, not piety, not branding, but wholeness. You say what you mean, you feel what you feel, you act in alignment with your inner knowing, not to gain approval or avoid rejection, but because it is true for you. You stop trying to convince, you stop trying to fix others, you stop trying to manage perceptions, you trust that what is real will remain, and what falls away was never truly yours. This is not easy, it is not glamorous, it will cost you. Relationships may end, careers may shift, your place in the world may become less clear. But what you gain is something no manipulator can ever take. You gain yourself. And in gaining yourself, you also gain your vision, your clarity, the ability to see manipulation as it arises, to detect it not only in others, but in your own behaviors. And in seeing it, you gain the power to choose differently, to love without controlling, to speak without performing, to lead without dominating, to heal without pretending, to live without betraying yourself. And perhaps that is the final, most powerful realization. Freedom is not given, it is remembered. It is remembered in the stillness of solitude, in the courage of truth, in the fire of grief, in the strength of boundaries, in the softness of compassion. It is remembered when you no longer fear who you are. It is remembered the moment you look into the mirror, not to assess, not to critique, not to fix, but to see, truly see, the unfiltered, unperformed, unmanipulated self. And you say, you were here the whole time. You were never broken, just buried, never weak, just silenced, never lost, just waiting. And now, you're awake. Now, you remember.